Stand with Moses at the very end of his life on the wind-swept summit of Mount Nebo. He is 120 years old, looking out across the vast Jordan Valley all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. The book of Deuteronomy records a remarkable physical detail about this moment. It specifically notes his eyes were not weak. We have been conditioned by the modern Western diet to accept failing eyesight and thick reading glasses as an inevitable part of normal aging. But modern diets oxidize and damage the delicate tissue of our retinas. God provided a specific biological blueprint to sustain the physical vision of his prophets in the harsh wilderness. Stick around because item 1 is a sacred desert resin that clinical trials confirm actively protects the fragile optic nerve from the pressure that steals peripheral vision. Item 8. Grapes. Ancient Egyptian medical papyri and early Greek physicians consistently documented the consumption of dark, heavy fruit for physical endurance and tissue preservation. They understood that these deep pigments held unique physical medicine long before modern science could explain why. This biological reality was authenticated in the 13th chapter of Numbers. A single cluster of dark grapes from the valley of Eshcol was so massive 2 men were needed to carry it. That sheer physical size points to a remarkable concentration of a potent botanical protector called resveratrol. Resveratrol acts as a physical reinforcement beam for the microscopic blood vessels running through the back of your eye. It measurably reduces the risk of those tiny capillaries leaking or collapsing as we age. The failure of those blood vessels drives severe vision loss. Researchers discovered resveratrol physically preserves the structural integrity of the retina by halting the breakdown of those critical vessels. Nutrients published that finding in 2021. You can harness this ancient provision by eating a handful of dark purple grapes with the seeds intact a few times a week. The heavy clusters growing in the ancient valley of Eshcol contained the exact biological architecture needed to keep human eyes sharp. The clusters of Eshcol were proof that the promised land was worth fighting for. The next item is not a fruit. It is a nut that appeared on a dead piece of wood, in a miracle that ended a dispute among priests. Item 7. Almonds. The 17th chapter of Numbers describes how a dead piece of wood miraculously burst into life overnight. God caused Aaron's wooden staff to physically sprout branches, blossom, and produce fully ripe almonds by the very next morning. That specific nut, chosen by God to demonstrate his authority, is densely packed with a highly specialized fat-soluble compound known as alpha-tocopherol. Alpha-tocopherol is a powerful biological shield that embeds itself directly into the cellular membranes of your eyes. It wraps around your fragile eye cells and physically blocks the oxidative decay that causes the lens to become cloudy and rigid over the decades. High dietary intake of this compound measurably reduced the risk of age-related lens clouding by 20%. The Archives of Ophthalmology published that finding in 2008. You can add this provision to your daily routine by eating a small handful of raw almonds every afternoon. We read the story of Aaron's staff as a lesson in spiritual leadership and often miss the profound physical medicine hanging from the branches. God chose a nut to settle a dispute over priestly authority. The next item did not settle a dispute. It started one. The Israelites were weeping in the desert because they missed it. Item 6. Garlic. The journey through the harsh and unforgiving wilderness broke the spirit of the Israelites in the 11th chapter of Numbers. They wept to Moses about the monotonous diet of manna. They specifically craved the pungent garlic they used to eat freely back in Egypt. While their complaining was a spiritual failure, their physical bodies were actually crying out for one of the most potent biological protectors on Earth. When you physically crush a clove of raw garlic, it releases a powerful botanical compound called allicin. Allicin naturally commands your body to measurably increase its production of glutathione. Glutathione is the primary protective compound naturally present in your eyes. It acts as a biological shield against the dangerous protein clumping that clouds the lens and forms thick cataracts. Researchers found allicin extract measurably increased these protective enzyme levels in the eye, and reduced clouded lens formation in the conditions studied. The Journal of Ocular Pharmacology and Therapeutics published that confirmation in 2013. Crush a single clove of raw garlic, let it sit for 10 minutes, then add it to your dinner. The Israelites craved it for its flavor, but God knew it possessed the power to keep their physical bodies functioning in the desert. The Israelites wept for the foods of Egypt in the wilderness. The next item came to Jerusalem through its stone gates during a moment of rebuilding after one of the darkest chapters in Israel's history. Item 5. Fish. The rebuilding of Jerusalem after the Babylonian exile required securing the city from hostile forces and establishing vital trade routes for physical survival. The 13th chapter of Nehemiah specifically mentions the merchants of Tyre, bringing fish through the massive stone gates of Jerusalem. That specific trade route brought a crucial source of medicine straight into the heart of the ancient biblical diet. The fish traded through those gates provided a highly structural dietary fat known as docosahexaenoic acid, or DHA. DHA is not just a helpful nutrient. It actually makes up over 50% of the physical structure of the light-capturing cells inside your retina. When you consume it, you are providing the raw physical building blocks your eyes use to capture light and send visual signals to your brain. Individuals with the highest intake of this structural fat have a significantly lower risk of severe age-related visual decline. The American Journal of Clinical Nutrition published that finding in 2008. The very structure of the human eye relies on the exact foods traded in ancient Jerusalem. You can support your own retinal structure by eating wild-caught sardines or salmon twice a week. We often forget our eyes are physical organs that require specific building blocks to survive. Over half of your eye's light-capturing cells are built from the exact fat found in the ancient biblical diet. If you are ready to stop accepting vision loss as normal, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. The bitter desert leaf coming up in item 4 acts like biological sunglasses to protect your central vision. The fat carried through Jerusalem's gates builds the structure of your retina. The next item comes from a night far older than any of those gates. The last night before everything changed. Item 4. Bitter herbs. The final night before the exodus from Egypt was defined by a highly specific meal engineered for physical endurance. In the 12th chapter of Exodus, God commanded the Israelites to eat the Passover lamb with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Those dark and fibrous leafy greens were not just symbolic reminders of the bitterness of slavery. They were heavily packed with an extraordinary plant pigment called lutein. Lutein acts like a pair of internal biological sunglasses for your eyes. When you eat these bitter greens, your body extracts the pigment and deposits it straight into the macula. This is the tiny center of your retina responsible for sharp and detailed vision. It sits there and physically blocks the high-energy light waves that damage central vision over time. Clinical researchers demonstrated increasing dietary lutein significantly increased this protective pigment layer in the eye and measurably improved visual sharpness. The journal Investigative Ophthalmology and Visual Science published that result in 2014. The dark greens commanded for the Passover meal were quietly protecting the eyesight of an entire nation. The research simply confirmed it. You can build up your own internal sunglasses by eating a daily serving of dark leafy greens like kale or arugula. The bitter herbs of Passover protected the eyes of a nation leaving slavery. The next fruit comes from a passage Moses delivered 40 years later. The wilderness was behind them, and the promised land was just ahead. Item 3. Pomegranate. Moses prepared the Israelites for the reality of the promised land by describing its incredible agricultural wealth in the 8th chapter of Deuteronomy. He specifically named the pomegranate as one of the foundational foods growing in that good land. This beautiful crown-shaped fruit contains a profoundly protective botanical compound designed to protect the most fragile communication cable in your body. The deep red seeds and bitter white membranes of the pomegranate are loaded with a dense botanical compound called punicolagens. Punicalagins measurably dilate your blood vessels and drive a steady supply of oxygen-rich blood directly to the hardworking tissues of your optic nerve. Your optic nerve requires a continuous flow of oxygen to function. Starving it of blood flow is a primary cause of silent vision loss. Scientists found this fruit's extracts significantly enhanced blood flow to the eye and measurably protected the delicate cells of the optic nerve. The journal Experimental Eye Research published that finding in 2016. The fruit Moses promised the Israelites was literally engineered to keep their internal biological networks fully supplied with life. You can drink half a cup of pure, unsweetened pomegranate juice a few times a week to support your own optic nerve health. The ancient world viewed the pomegranate as a symbol of life. The research has since confirmed it. The pomegranate Moses promised fed the optic nerve with steady blood flow. The oil that comes next was not grown in a field. It was pressed and delivered for a different kind of light entirely. Item 2. Olive oil. The inner sanctuary of the ancient tabernacle was entirely shielded from natural sunlight and required a very specific fuel to remain illuminated. In Exodus chapter 27, God commanded pure, clear, pressed olive oil to keep the tabernacle lamps burning before the Lord. That exact oil contains a rare molecule that physically protects the light-sensing cells in your own eyes. That molecule is a specialized botanical compound called hydroxytyrosol. Hydroxytyrosol measurably reduces the retinal cell deterioration and oxidative damage associated with age-related central vision loss. Researchers discovered it physically protects vulnerable retinal cells from the specific oxidative stress that causes them to slowly die off. Nutrients published that finding in 2017. The sacred lamp oil of the Old Testament contains the profound biological tool for preserving human eyesight. Use 2 tablespoons of high-quality, cold-pressed extra virgin olive oil over your salads every single day. We seek complex medical solutions, while the exact oil commanded for the tabernacle holds the power to protect our vision. The oil that kept the tabernacle lamp burning was quietly preserving the light-sensing cells of human eyes. The resin that closes this list traveled across the ancient world toward a city of the Lord, and it carried something even more specific inside it. Item 1. Frankincense. The prophet Isaiah looked forward to a future time of profound restoration in the 60th chapter of his book. He described a massive caravan from Sheba traveling ancient trade routes carrying gold and frankincense to the city of the Lord. This heavily traded sacred resin was far more than an expensive luxury commodity. It contains one of the most powerful biological protectors ever discovered for the human optic nerve. Frankincense resin is densely concentrated in a specialized botanical molecule called boswellic acid. Boswellic acid actively shuts down the localized inflammatory pressure building up inside the fluid of the eye. When that pressure gets too high, it physically crushes the optic nerve and quietly steals your peripheral vision. Modern researchers found boswellic acid significantly reduced inflammatory pressure inside the optic nerve. It measurably protected the delicate fibers of the optic nerve from severe pressure damage. The journal Phytomedicine published that discovery in 2019. The fragrant resin carried across the ancient deserts holds profound biological protective power for the human eye. Carefully massage a single drop of high-quality frankincense oil into your temples during times of high stress or eye strain. Please make sure you never apply it directly into your eye. The most valuable trade good of the ancient world was engineered to protect the fragile architecture of human sight. The story of Moses standing on Mount Nebo does not just end with a description of the landscape. Deuteronomy chapter 34 verse 7 records exactly how that life ended. Moses was 120 years old when he died, yet his eyes were not weak nor his strength gone. That is not just a passing historical detail, it is a definitive statement about the biological provision God used to sustain his prophet's vision across a lifetime in the wilderness. The bitter herbs of the Passover meal and the olive oil pressed for the tabernacle were not random diet choices. You are looking at a deliberate biological provision designed to protect and preserve our physical bodies in a fallen world. Please remember that these are foods and ancient plants with thousands of years of documented use and peer-reviewed research behind them, not medical prescriptions. We were never meant to quietly accept the decay of our physical senses. The exact botanical tools designed to support and preserve our eyesight have been growing quietly in the dirt since the very first week of creation. Which of these ancient biblical foods surprised you the most today? Have you ever tried increasing your intake of dark grapes or raw almonds for your own vision health? Let me know down in the comments, because I read every single one of them. Make sure you subscribe to the channel to keep uncovering this lost wisdom. Click the video on your screen right now to discover the specific ancient spices that measurably support healthy blood pressure.